What is up, everybody? Welcome to AK Plays. I'm AK. Let's play. Alright, everybody, so today I'm going to be talking about DPS builds. How important are DPS builds in Update 1.8.3? What is their role, and really, where does everything stand with them? Now, first, before I start into DPS builds, the background footage that you're watching is me with a tactician build and a couple of teammates, and then I threw in a couple of DPS clips, but mostly tactician because I just haven't given the support builds much love recently, so I hope you guys enjoy that, and they are a very important part of the meta. Now, on to DPS builds, everyone's favorite to talk about. Now, DPS builds, obviously, as you're thinking, of course they're important, AK. We need DPS to be able to put people down and continue to move on with either our manhunt or killing the rogues. And to that I say yes, of course, DPS is important. But if it was the most important thing, we would see everyone running 10k firearms. And if it was completely unimportant, we'd see 10k stamina, 10k electronics. Now, obviously it's important, but it's not the most important thing, so people run a very balanced version of that, which I agree with. Now, I've seen a lot of people running 8k firearms, which I think is high, but at the very top of like a good range. Now I see 9k and I see 10k firearms. Now when I see that, I think that's a little reckless. Now, I'll explain why, but I don't really know if I agree with 9 and 10k firearms, even with a vigorous chest. I think that that's pushing it and a little irresponsible for to do to your teammates. Now, I've also seen people that are running with 5k firearms on a team. And if you're running with a couple of support builds, then I think 5k is a little too low. Well, a lot too low. But basically, the way I think that every team should be ran at this moment in the meta is with a healer and a support build. Whether that's a reclaimer and a D3, a reclaimer and a tactician, a reclaimer and a final measure, a tactician and a final measure. Any mix of two support builds, one being a healer, one being a true support build, I think is good. And then your other two players should be your DPSers. Whether that is Banshee Vigorous, Alpha Bridge Vigorous, Alpha, Banshee, Lone Star, a sniper build. Not a lot of people do that, but hey, don't knock it till you try it. Basically, however you run it, your two DPSers should be responsible for most of the DPS. Now, of course, if you're fighting a server of 12, 14, 15 people, you might have to go to 3 DPSers and put a little more work on that one support build. Now, depending on how that works, I think your DPS builds should only be running in the neighborhood of 6,500 firearms up to 8,200 firearms. In that range, I'd say that's the acceptable range for DPS builds. Outside of that, you're either doing not enough and you're going to have people pile up and kill your team, or you're doing way too much and you're going to get bursted down and you're not going to have time for your medic to save you. If you're running 10k firearms, even with a vigorous chest, you could get bursted down so quickly that your teammate is not going to be able to hit you with a defib or a recovery link. And in that case, it's going to be pretty rough, and your team's just going to be stuck without a DPS player, and it's going to be really hard on them. Now, the reason that I'm making all of these statements is because of how the meta is going on right now. At this present moment, the 3 meta builds are D3 FNC, Nomad, and Predator's Mark. All of these builds are extremely difficult to take down with burst damage. Obviously, you can beat them over time, but when it comes to burst damage and high DPS builds going against them, it is extremely difficult. Now, that is because Predator's Mark has 9k stamina if you're running it correctly, and that has a lot to take down, but Predator's Mark is a dream compared to the other two. Nomad, if you're running against solo Nomad players, they could have unlimited lives, and they get 60% resistance every time you kill them. Now, this is very difficult to take down. I know unlimited is a little bit of a overstatement, but you get what I mean. They could get a bunch of extra lives and have a ton of resistance. Burst damage doesn't really work against them. You're going to need to beat them over time again and again and again. Then, the third, D3 FNC, which is an extremely strong build and is very difficult to counter. Even to kill it one time is very difficult, but, you know, if you have multiple on the server, it's very difficult, and they're giving their team stamina buffs. Now, they can push you pretty much without fear, and that makes it difficult to burst them down as well. Meaning, if you're running against a server of meta builds, you're going to need to have a bunch of support builds and enough stamina to stay up from burst damage, so you can continue to beat them over time, because you're going to need to beat them again and again and again to be able to kill off the server. Now, you might get lucky and run into a server of all hybrid builds, old striker builds, and people that really don't care what the meta is. They're running what they want to run. If you run into that, go ahead. You can have a field day with your firearms. But if you're running into a meta team, a meta server, you're going to have to run with a little bit more conservative firearms. Now, obviously, you're going to need enough to take them down, so you can't just run with barely any firearms and survive the whole time. If it was a game of survivability, everyone would be running Reclaimers and 10k stam Nomads. But it's not. You need to be able to put people down, and to do that, I think you need at least 6,500 firearms. And this isn't talking solo play. In solo play, you can run with less firearms and just beat people consistently. But in group play, fighting 12, 14 people, you're going to need enough firearms to put people down. And to do that, I think you need 6,500 or more. Now, the cap, as I said, is about 8,200. Now, above that, even above 8,000, you start getting into the dangerous territory. And that's kind of the risk you're willing to take, but if you're a good player, you can try to run with a little more, and depending on how many people you're fighting, you can try to run with a little bit more. But be careful, because the more you run with, the more you could get burst damage. And even with support builds and healers and all the things that make it sound easy, you could get hit with a frag grenade and stagger it across your Reclaimer's box and get launched outside of it, and then get bursted down by all the enemies you're fighting. You never know what can happen, and that's why a little bit of stamina is necessary. I would say that running with a Vigorous Chest can make this a little easier, and if you run with a Vigorous Chest, you might get away with a little bit more firearms. Other than that, I think that basically, in conclusion, you're going to be running with 6,500 firearms to 8,000 firearms. Obviously, there's a little bit of give on both ends of that, but that's my kind of recommendation. I would say that more than that is too dangerous. Less than that, you're not going to be able to kill enough people. And that's kind of where I stand on it all. I think support builds are necessary. Running with 4 DPSers is not going to be very successful. This is a serious team meta. And if you're not running with your team, running supporting builds and helping each other, you're just a waste. And another 4-man team is going to come take you down. And really, that's it. DPS builds are kind of important, but more important in every regard is your team dynamic and how your team works together and what your team is running. I would say that not in old metas, in old updates, patches, a good player could carry a team and demolish other teams. But in this meta, that's just not the case. You need to be working together as a good 4-man unit and running builds that support each other. And basically, that's the answer. So, I hope that helps. And if you guys agree, disagree, if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. And I will catch you guys tomorrow. Now, tomorrow's video, I'm hoping to do a really interesting one. It's nothing crazy, nothing insane, but a build that is so interesting to look at. It might not be the greatest for solo or group play, but it has one of the coolest effects you've ever seen, and I guarantee you've never seen anything like it. So, tune in for that one tomorrow. I will catch you guys later.